speaker is Brendon Kim, is our host today, and is a very experienced managing director of strategic investments here at this innovation center. Brendon, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you, and thank you so much for what you are doing for us here, letting us come to the Valley.
No, thank you. You're very welcome. We're so happy to have you here. The partnership between Samsung and MIT has been really fruitful, and so we hope to continue to maintain this partnership. I want to welcome you to Samsung and to our campus here. The campus here is Samsung Research America. So we have a number of labs in this building that are trying to develop new services, new software products, new devices to advance our business, but to really change the way consumers look at consumer electronics. But also within this building, we also have the Global Innovation Center, which I'm a part of. I'm going to go through a little bit about what the Global Innovation Center does and how it applies to startups, and then we'll talk a little bit about startup ready and industry ready. So a little bit about Samsung first. As many of you know, we're leaders in lots of different products. But I didn't, when I first joined Samsung about 3 years ago, I just didn't realize how large we were. We're over 350,000 people. We're number one in mobile and tablets, visual displays, refrigerators, and the fastest growing home appliance brand in the US. We sell 208 million mobile phones every 208 million mobile phones shipped last year. That's 13 per second. Nearly 2 TVs sold per second, so 1,001 sold another 2 TVs, right? The challenge that we have, though, is we have hardware roots. And so we're great at doing hardware design, and we've been good at that for a very long time. But now I think we're trying to transition to a new kind of business. We're trying to transition a little bit more to software and services. We know that in order to maintain our leadership there, we have to really thoughtfully combine hardware, software, and services. And how do we do that? How do we do that as a company with hardware roots where hardware thinking and software thinking can be very different? Right? When you ship a piece of hardware, it better work all the time. You can't afford to have like a recall. With software, it's very different. It's an iterative kind of process. So you ship with a few bugs, you call those bugs features, and then you release a new update and you do an upgrade, right? And when you launch a piece of software or service, there's this ecosystem maintenance and this constant sort of upgrading and maintenance of the piece of software or service that you have to do. With hardware, very different kind of thinking. So when we thought about trying to innovate in software and services, we thought about where should we be? Where's that software and services innovation happening? Well, it's happening in the US in places like Silicon Valley, and it's happening with startups. Right? It's not happening with the large companies. We do our own innovations in-house, but we can't just rely on the innovation that's happening internally within Samsung. So we wanted to make sure that we were reaching out. And the way we wanted to reach out was to create what we call the Global Innovation Center. So the Global Innovation Center mission is to create breakout products by empowering entrepreneurs. And we do that in 4 ways. First, we have an investments team. So we invest in compelling early stage startups that have the potential to benefit Samsung. We want to accelerate startup growth while bringing that software and service innovation that startups have into Samsung. We also have a partnerships organization. So we're building relationships with lots of companies, startups and larger startups, in order to help us to bring, again, that software and services innovation to Samsung. We have an acquisitions team so that we can acquire a company that, again, to bring software and services innovation into Samsung. And we also have an accelerator where you can be a 2-person company with an idea, and we'll bring you into Samsung as well. So we'll do everything. So we'll adopt you in the accelerator, we'll acquire you, we'll partner with you, we'll invest with you. What we want to be is we want to be open to all different ways of operating with a startup throughout their entire life cycle. So we want to be startup ready in that sense. Of course, we're not the only ones that are doing this. There's lots of corporations that are doing this. In fact, in 2015, over $7 billion was invested by corporate VCs, and that's 13% of all VC dollars that were committed last year. But even a more interesting number is the number of deals in which corporates participated, which was 21%. So more and more corporates are coming into the market. And if there's any kind of trend that I've seen over the last year, over the last 2 years that was really interesting for me, prior to coming to Samsung, I was an institutional VC investor for 15 years. And the last 2 years, I've seen this real explosion of interest in corporate VCs. We had that interest in the bubble, in the past big bubble, lots of corporates lost a lot of money. They stepped away from venture investing and said, we'll never do that again. But I think they've come to realize that you really can't stay away. That startups are a hotbed of too much innovation for us to stay away. And I think we're thinking about things differently this second time around. And so I've seen a real change in thinking about how corporates want to interact with startups. So a lot of corporations want to be startup ready. So what do you think about when you want to be industry ready? So when you think about taking potentially corporate money as an investor or taking on a corporation as an investor, what are the things that you might want to think about? So the way I address this, I talk about 3 myths that I see within the corporate world, within the corporate investing world. And again, having come from a financial institutional VC background to a corporate background, I've seen sort of both sides of the equation. And of course, I'm biased now that I'm on the corporate side. So take that with a grain of salt. So corporate investors' interests are not aligned with those of the entrepreneurs, myth number 1. And the corollary to that is financial investors are aligned. And I would say that that's definitely not true. All investors have a point of view and a place that they're coming from, right? And one example here that I'll say about financial investors is that financial investors have a portfolio. They have lots of lottery tickets. Entrepreneurs have the one lottery ticket, right? And that changes the calculus when you think about risk and when you think about returns. And so that's just one thing to keep in mind. Corporates also may not be aligned with you either. Corporates generally, when they make an investment, they're looking for that strategic angle too, and so they may or may not align, right? The key here is to ask that question: is where are we aligned and where are we not aligned? And it's not a question about are you corporate or are you financial. It's about asking each individual investor that question about how you're aligned and where you're not aligned, and knowing that as you go into a partnership with an investor. Second myth is corporate investors don't add a lot of value, particularly early on, and that corporate money is generally dumb money, right? And this might have been true at the height of the bubble this last time around, but I think it's really changed. I think corporations, again, have a changed perspective on how to work with startups, and I think startups are beginning to see this change as well. And certainly the numbers that I showed you earlier in terms of the amount of corporate money going to venture and the amount of deals that corporate ventures are doing is an indication of that. There are places where corporations may not add value, and you have to think about that. So sometimes corporations can be distracting. So if you are an early stage company and you went on, let's say Indiegogo or something like that, and you promised to ship a certain number of products by a certain number of time, in a certain amount of time, you may not have the luxury to work with a corporate that might be a little slower, that might have priorities that are slightly off roadmap to you, things like that. So you have to be careful about that, about making sure that you are on roadmap when you're working with a corporation, so that the corporation is not taking you off to the side, but that they are advancing what you want to do, right? So you want to keep that in mind. But yet corporations can be very value-added, even at the very early stages. One of the things you have to keep in mind is sometimes it takes a while for a product to get to market. So you want to get in there earlier rather than later. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is corporations can be great development partners for you. And I think we talked about that a little earlier, in that corporations can really help you to be can be a co-development partner for you. So to help you understand where the markets are and understand the kind of real-world problems that corporations are facing with their customers or internally. Last thing is that corporate investors limit options, and you might as well have sold your company already, right? And I think, again, here, that's not necessarily the case, but there is a kernel of truth to that. Sometimes corporations will want to perhaps have exclusivity or right of first refusal on an acquisition offer or something like that. But again, I think corporations from the last bubble, are really understanding that in order to access the best startups, you really cannot limit the options of the startups, right? So you want to work with corporations who have that understanding, who are going to be option enhancing and never option limiting. So as a general rule for Samsung, when we go in to make an investment, we don't ask for a ROFR. We don't ask for any exclusivities. You can work with any customer you'd like, any partner you'd like. You can work with any of our competitors, right? It's our job to make sure that we're the right partner for you, right? It's our job to make it easy to work with Samsung. But if you find it easier to work with somebody else, if you find more value somewhere else, that's where you should go to. And as an investor, we should recognize that and help you to do that, actually. So in closing, I'd say that when considering corporate capital, it's the same as for all investors. Ask the smart questions. Ask about alignment. Ask about value add. Where are you in your stage of the company, and what kind of things do you need from an investor aside from capital? And make sure that anybody that you work with is option enhancing rather than option limiting. Thank you very much.